cloth and live peacefully. Save time and chant Hare Krishna. This is actual life. What is this nonsense life? Big cities and all these people busy. To see a friend, he has to go 30 miles. If he has to see a physician, he has to go 50 miles. If he has to work, another 100 miles. So what is this life? This is not life. Be satisfied. A devotee's life should be prayojana. We require material necessities, as such as is required, not artificial life. Srila Prabhupada went on to deprecate the life of simply machine. He asked the devotees to show by practical example how to live simply and advance in Krishna consciousness. If they could show the example, people would try to follow. Although Nityananda and the others had been living on the land for many months, Prabhupada's words gave them the real direction and purpose for the project. It was as if he were now breathing life into his project. Srila Prabhupada went to his room and sat with Brahmananda Swami, Satswarup Das Goswami, Harikesh, Jagadish, and Upendra. When he began speaking about Varnashram, he called for Nityananda. They should try not to use machines, he said. The men and animals should do the work. Nityananda asked whether the householders should produce food cooperatively or as individual families. They should work together, said Prabhupada, or what's the use of living in a community center? When Upendra asked how the milk should be used, Srila Prabhupada explained what he called the Indian village system. As Nanda Maharaj was keeping cows, he said, similarly, there are many villages. They have a big pan, and whatever milk is collected, they put into that pan. It is kept on a fire and is warm, so the whole family can drink milk whenever they like. Then whatever milk remains at night, they have to convert it into yogurt. The next day, they use milk and yogurt also as they like. Then after converting the milk into yogurt, whatever remains is stored. If there is sufficient old yogurt, they churn, and then butter comes out. They take that butter, and the water separated from the butter is called whey. So instead of dal, they use this whey for eating with chapatis. It will be very healthy and tasty. Meanwhile, the butter they turn into ghee. There is not a single drop of waste. Srila Prabhupada said that everyone could take as much milk as necessary and that the ghee could be used in ISKCON restaurants in the cities. Curd could also be used in the restaurants for making sandesh, rasagula, and other dishes. Srila Prabhupada stressed that the farm be well organized, engaging all classes of men, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. No laziness or unemployment. Otherwise, he said, people will criticize that we are simply eating and sleeping and escaping. Nityananda asked whether they should immediately stop using farm machinery. We are not against the machines, Prabhupada explained. You can utilize machine, but we should not allow others to be unemployed while we use the machine. This is the point. You can use the machine, but the first thing is that everyone should be employed. If you've got many men, then why should you engage the machine? Srila Prabhupada also explained that in Vedic culture, the Kshatriyas collected taxes and protected the citizens, while the Shudras worked in the fields or at trade. The women would cook, spin, weave, and take care of the milk products. The low-class men, such as cobblers, who used the skin of dead cows, were allowed to eat meat. But not that one is Professor such and yet he is eating meat, Prabhupada said. That is the way of degraded modern society. Teacher means Brahmin, and yet he is eating meat? How horrible. So do these things and organize. I can give you idea, but I will not live very long. If you can carry it out, you can change the whole world, especially if you can change America, then the whole world will change. Srila Prabhupada became emotional and tears came to his eyes. It is the duty, he said. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has explained, para upakara, save them. If it is not possible to save everyone, as many as possible. This is human life. This is Krishna consciousness, to save those who are in the darkness. Don't think, he said, Krishna consciousness is my profession. I am getting a living, food and shelter. That is just what the Indians are doing. Not like that. It is para upakara. That is Krishna consciousness. Then Krishna will be very much pleased. Krishna personally comes for giving this benefit to the people. And if you do, then how much Krishna will be pleased. Just like I am traveling to my centers. And if I see that my students, my men, are doing very nice, everything is going nice, how much pleased I will be. Then I can save my labors and now write books for the rest of my life. Similarly, if Krishna sees that you are, on behalf of Krishna, trying to save these rascals, then you will very much please Krishna. The Vaishnava's qualification is paradukaduki. He is unhappy seeing others distressed. This is Vaishnava. Srila Prabhupada ended the intimate meeting by rising and leaving the room. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. So we're reading from the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 17. The chapter is called The Lord Travels to Vrindavan. And we're continuing from text number 55. We'll just go through the English for these verses. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu passed through the Jarikanda forest, he took it for granted that it was Vrindavan. When he passed over the hills, he took it for granted that they were Govardhan. Similarly, whenever Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw a river, he immediately accepted it as the river Yamuna. Thus, while in the forest, he was filled with great ecstatic love, and he danced and fell down crying. Along the way, Balabhadra Bhattacharya collected all kinds of spinach, roots, and fruit whenever possible. Whenever Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu visited a village, a few Brahmins, 5 or 7, would come and extend invitations to the Lord. Some people would bring grain and deliver it to Balabhadra Bhattacharya. Others would bring milk and yogurt, and still others would bring ghee and sugar. So this is text number 60. We can just try and go through the Bengali. Yahan Vipra Nahi Tahan Shudra Mahajan. Yahan Vipra Nahi Tahan Shudra Mahajana. Ashi Sabe Bhattacharya Kare Nimantarana. Ashi Sabe Bhattacharya Kare Nimantarana. Yahan Vipra Nahitahan Shudra Mahajana. Asi Sabe Bhattacharya Kare Nimantarana. Yahan Vipra Nahitahan Shudra Mahajana. Asi Sabe Bhattacharya Kare Nimantarana. Yahan Vipra Nahitahan Sudra Mahajana. Asi Sabe Bhattacharya Kare Nimantarana.
Yahan Vipra Nahitahan Shudra Mahajana.
Yahan Vipra Nahitahan Shudra Mahajana.
Asi Sabe Bhattacharya Kare Nimantarana.
Asi sabe bhattacharya kare nimantrana.
Yaham vipranahitam shudra mahajana.
Yahan vipra nahitahan shudra mahajana.
Asi sabi bhattacharya karini mantrana.
Asi sabe bhattacharya kare nimantrana. Mataji.
Yahan vipranahitan sutra mahajana.
Yahan vipra nahitahan shudra mahajana.
Asi sabi bhattacharya karini mantrana.
Asi sabe bhattacharya kare nimantrana. Yahan, wherever, vipra, brahmana, nahi, there is not, tahan, there, shudra mahajana, devotees born in families other than Brahman, asi, coming, sabe, all of them, bhattacharya, to Balabhadra Bhattacharya, kare nimantrana, make invitation. Translation. In some villages there were no Brahmanas. Nonetheless, devotees born in non-Brahman families came and extended invitations to Balabhadra Bhattacharya. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Actually, a sannyasi or a brahmana will not accept an invitation extended by a person born in a lower family. However, there are many devotees who are raised to the platform of Brahman by their initiation. These people are called Shudra Mahajan. This indicates that one who is born in a non-Brahman family has accepted the Brahman status by initiation. Such devotees extend invitations to Balabhadra Bhattacharya. A Mayavadi sannyasi will accept an invitation only from a Brahman family, but a Vaishnava does not accept an invitation from a Brahman if he does not belong to the Vaishnava sect. However, a Vaishnava will accept an invitation from a Brahman or Shudra Mahajan if that person is an initiated Vaishnava. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself accepted invitations from Shudra Mahajans, and this confirms the fact that anyone initiated by a Vaishnav mantra can be accepted as a Brahman. One can accept an invitation from such a person. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Pastijadesha Tarane Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Yeah, so we're doing there it is. We're doing this course on Saturday evenings online, Gita Life, which some of you may have some experience of. And the course was designed by devotees down at Bhaktivedanta Mana, particularly Sutapa Prabhu. And being the transcendental genius that he is, he's gone through the whole of the Bhagavad Gita, and each chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, he's kind of created an acronym for each chapter, so that by memorizing the acronym, it means that we can memorize the different themes that come up over the course of each chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Because something we were discussing last night, it's a common phenomenon when we study the Bhagavad Gita, perhaps maybe in our initial study of the Bhagavad Gita, that we can appreciate the individual sort of you could say localized words of wisdom that Krishna speaks in the Bhagavad Gita. So we remember specific verses that Krishna says in the Gita. We remember that somewhere it says, of fishes I am a shark. Somewhere it says, as the embodied soul, this life goes from boyhood to youth to old age. So we pass into another body at death. We remember that somewhere says, as all surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. So we remember these individual verses, but especially in our initial study of the Gita, we don't always pick up on the flow of the Gita, the larger chunks of information that are there, the flow of the conversation, the way that Krishna is, sometimes Krishna will answer a question in one chapter that was asked by Arjuna 2 or 3 chapters earlier, or he will clarify a point in one chapter that's sort of reinforcing something that he's already said 100 verses previously. So to be able to pick up that requires study, and particularly as Srila Prabhupada says in the introduction, then we really need to study under the guidance of someone who's already studied the Bhagavad Gita, so that they can point these things out to us. So last couple of weeks, we've been studying chapter 4, Transcendental Knowledge. Now, the acronym for chapter 4 is EARS, because hearing is such a vital aspect of spiritual life, of bhakti yoga. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Varanam. So devotional service, bhakti, begins with hearing. So the acronym is EARS. And especially transcendental knowledge. Transcendental knowledge will burn away all of the inauspicious things within the heart by hearing and assimilating and acting on transcendental knowledge. So I'm trying to remember the whole acronym because I've only just started going through it. E stands for, I'm going to forget it right away. Anyway, R, jumping ahead to R, so I don't embarrass myself any more than I already am doing. R stands for removing misconceptions. So at a certain point in chapter 4, Krishna removes certain misconceptions that exist in the world, particularly in the world of those who study the Bhagavad Gita or who kind of study the teaching, the different yoga teachings, the different teachings of spirituality that exist in the world. And as is always the case, whenever there's a widespread practice of any teaching or philosophy or way of life, then there's always going to be misconceptions. There's always going to be a correct understanding and an incorrect understanding. So in the 4th chapter, he removes certain misconceptions. And one of the misconceptions that Krishna removes is in chapter 4, text number 13, where he says, according to the 3 modes of material nature and the work associated with them, the 4 divisions of human society are created by me. And although I am the creator of this system, you should know that I am yet the non-doer, being unchangeable. So this is removing the misconception that one is situated in the Varnashram system, particularly in the Varnas. One is situated in a particular Varna according to birth. This is the misconception, that one is a Shudra by birth, one is a Vaishya by birth, a Kshatriya by birth, a Brahmin by birth. And of course, Srila Prabhupada uses different examples. One example which he quite often uses is that, if someone is a judge, a high court judge, then that doesn't mean that the son can then go and sit in the court and deliver justice. And similarly, if you were to go for an operation, if you had like a major medical emergency and you went into the hospital and someone walked in and they were to say, okay, my dad's not available today. He's normally the doctor, but he's not available, so I'm filling in. And you would say, well, have you trained? Are you qualified? No, but it's okay because I grew up in a doctor family. I was born in a doctor family. I grew up in a doctor family. You're in safe hands. So we wouldn't feel too comfortable with that. It's just about to put us under general anesthetic. We're leaving our body in the hands of this person who hasn't received any actual training or doesn't really have the qualification of being a doctor. So this is a misconception that if someone is born in a Brahmin family, that automatically qualifies them as a Brahmana. So here in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes, he's passing through the Jharikanda forest, and generally speaking, in this misconceived culture, this culture of misconception, then it's quite often the case that those who are born in Brahmin families, those who are what you may call caste conscious, because there's a difference between the so-called caste system and the system of Varnashram Dharma. The caste system, which is been existent in India for I don't know how long time, and is very often criticized and is very often really raises eyebrows and causes concern in people's minds. Those who are very much attached to that system, if they are born in a family of Brahmins, then for instance, they won't eat food which is prepared by a non-Brahmana, and there's this real sort of segregation which is there, and sometimes to extreme proportions. I don't know if it's still the case, but there have been instances in history where if a so-called Shudra or if a so-called person of a lower caste is walking through the village, he has to make a big announcement. I am a Shudra and I'm walking through the village now. Please go into your home so you don't have to see me, so you don't have to look at me, and then everyone will run into the home and lock the doors, and it's a misconception. It's a gross misconception, and it's an abused system. And in the sense that someone is born in a particular family, then that gives them the opportunity to kind of lord it over people who are born in another family. But here in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's explaining that it's not according to birth that determines what a person's varna is. It's according to work and qualities, guna karma, qualities and the work that they're naturally drawn towards. And even besides that, regardless of what varna a person is born in, and just to clarify, when we speak about varna, the varnashram system that Krishna speaks about in the Bhagavad Gita, what it basically means is that within human society, there are natural social and occupational divisions which naturally exist. So the social occupations, the ashrams, means that in the beginning of our life, we go through the student life or brahmachari life. And then most of us then enter into the grihastha ashram or the householder ashram. We go through a period which is focusing on marriage, family, household responsibility. And then once we get beyond middle age and we start creeping towards old age, then we enter into the vanaprastha ashram, which is retired life, which is where we start to move away from the comforts of household life and start thinking more seriously that, I'm getting closer to that final exam now. I need to start thinking more seriously about austerity and focusing on bhajan and sadhana and study and bhakti, devotional service. Start thinking more seriously about these things, start becoming more absorbed in these things. And then the final stage of life is sannyas, or complete renunciation, where we just let go of all of our material attachments and just dedicate ourselves completely towards our spiritual journey. So these are the 4 ashrams. And then the 4 varnas are the occupational categories which exist in the world. So one category is the category of brahmanas, which means teachers, so-called intellectuals, and leaders, guides, so on. And then you have kshatriyas, which means administrators, rulers, governors, politicians, kings, organizers. And then there are vaishyas, which means businessmen, mercantile men, and then shudras, which the shudras is a big category, actually. Generally speaking, I can't remember the exact percentage, but it's somewhere between 80 and 90% or between 75-85%. It's a big portion of population which comes under this very, very big umbrella category of Shudra, which means workers, artists, actors, entertainers, general workers, just the people who are just getting things done, getting things done in the world. And part of the misconception which comes about in the caste system is that those who are in the so-called, like the Shudra category, are a kind of lower caste, and then someone who is born in a Brahmin family or a Kshatriya family, they're very high class. But it's all according to guna or karma. It's according to quality and the work that we're naturally drawn to. And the point that's coming up here in the purport, and the point that Lord Chaitanya, he's teaching by his own example, is that it actually doesn't matter what caste or what varna or what ashram a person is in. All of that is irrelevant. The point is, are we a Vaishnava? Are we a devotee? Are we engaged in devotional service to Krishna? Are we dedicating our life for the pleasure of Krishna? And if one is in that category, then that transcends all other categories. And if one is actually really practicing the process of bhakti properly, then according to our acharyas and according to the behavior and the example of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then that actually puts one in a higher category than any of the varnas. So by guna karma, by work, and by our kind of psychophysical nature, that may mean that we're drawn towards engaging in the work and external behavior of either a Shudra, a Vaishya, a Kshatriya, or a Brahmana. But if our internal nature is that we're meditating upon Krishna, we're acting for the pleasure of Krishna, we're working for the service of Krishna, then that puts us in the category of Vaishnava. So in this way, as Srila Prabhupada, he gives this interesting expression in the purport, that someone may be a Shudra by guna karma, but if one is a Vaishnava by nature, then that makes them a Shudra Mahajan. So they may be Brahman by initiation. We may not have all the qualities of a Brahmana in full, in totality. There are, I certainly don't. I'm struggling to remember the if anyone can, to what is chapter 17 or chapter 18, where Krishna describes the qualities of a Brahman, cleanliness and austerity. What else? Control of the mind, control of the senses, simplicity. Study of the Vedas, yeah. So there's qualities that are there, and this is supposed to make up the lifestyle of a Brahmana. And it's interesting. Hari Sori Prabhu. Hari Sori was Srila Prabhupada's personal assistant. Traveled with him for about 18 or 19 months, and he does these seminars. Srila Prabhupada, the Living Bhagavatam, where he describes, his own personal experiences of traveling with Prabhupada and how Srila Prabhupada taught by example as an acharya. And one of the categories in the seminar that he delivers is the category of cleanliness. And Hari is very, very amusing the way he describes stories, because Prabhupada was always pulling the devotees up about cleanliness, because Prabhupada was so conscious of cleanliness beyond anything that anyone could even, any tiny little thing that devotees did, which kind of stepped outside of real Brahminical cleanliness, Srila Prabhupada immediately picked them up on it. It's like if they picked a cup up the wrong way, or if they organized the table in such a way that the salt and pepper was, if things had been organized so that they would have to, the person that was eating would have to also touch something, and that would then contaminate everything else. And it's a whole big seminar. You can look it up online, and there's hours and hours of anecdotes of Srila Prabhupada kind of pointing these things out. But very often Hari Sori would be saying to Prabhupada, I'm so sorry, it's just I can't keep up with it. I can't keep up with the standard of cleanliness. It's so unnatural to me to live according to the standard of cleanliness. And Srila Prabhupada would laugh. He'd say, it's okay. You just do the best you can. do the best you can. So, we may know what the qualities of a Brahmin are, and we may be in the category of Brahmin by initiation, but we may be struggling to really, really, really manifest the qualities of a Brahmana. We may not be really simple in our behavior. We may not be very, very learned in the Vedas. We may not be completely clean in our activities, in our behavior. We may not be very austere. Like today's Ekadashi, you may have, people who are very caste conscious Brahmins. Then it's a very big thing on Ekadashi. We fast. No water, nothing in, nothing out, very, very strict, very rigid, and Prabhupada's mood was, no, Ekadashi, feasting means fasting. Just have it. You can eat more on Ekadashi. There's no grains, there's no bread. You've got room for more sabji, more sweets, So Prabhupada was very, very lenient. So we may not come up to this, the very, very high standards of a Brahmin, but the real thing is what's going on inside. Are we cultivating love for Krishna? Are we dedicating a mood of bhakti towards Krishna? Are we becoming more and more devoted towards Krishna? And here the devotee, he's made his offering to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was accepting that offering. Why? Because the person is a Brahmin in the fullest sense of the term. Maybe yes, maybe no. But more importantly, Lord Chaitanya accepts that offering because the person is a Vaishnava. We can cook and we can offer food to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because we're trying to be devotees. We're trying to practice bhakti. We're trying to practice devotional service. We're doing the best we can. And this is what Srila Prabhupada, he would laugh, and then there's this very, very funny story in London where the devotees organized a big festival. Srila Prabhupada had come to London. The devotees organized a big festival, and they've spent weeks advertising the festival, handing out leaflets. Shama Sundar was there, so they probably put all sorts of adverts in the newspapers and things. And he was very they really went out of the way to organize this big festival. And then when the day came, they took Srila Prabhupada to the hall, and depending on who you listen to, either no one came or hardly anyone came. It was just the whole place. There was just a few seats filled, and then this big empty space. But Prabhupada said, do kirtan, have kirtan, no problem, just have kirtan. And the devotees were singing, they were dancing, and they were dancing around and around the hall. And then after the festival, the devotees who had organized it went to see Srila Prabhupada. They said, Prabhupada, I'm so sorry, no one came. We made all that effort. We took you along to this program. We inconvenienced you. And after all that, no one came. And Prabhupada said, you didn't see Lord Brahma? You didn't see Narada Muni? And the devotee said, no, Srila Prabhupada, we didn't see them. And Prabhupada said, oh, they were there. They came. And the devotee said, well, what were they doing? And Prabhupada said, they were laughing at all the hippies and malechas and yavanas trying to chant Hare Krishna. So even if we can bring pleasure to Srila Prabhupada and Narada Muni and Lord Brahma it's like a little child, anyone who has children knows, any tiny little thing that they do, any word that comes out of the mouth, they try to walk, and the kind of stumbling and staggering and the clumsy and the way children speak, it's like this broken language, and they say very sweet, naive things. Sometimes they'll really embarrass the parents. Devotees come around for lunch and the kids will say, oh, when can we finish so we can go and watch Star Wars or something like that? It's like, shush, 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 shush. When can we have some chocolate? Shush, shush, shush. So children will embarrass the parents and do all sorts of things. But everything that they do brings pleasure because the parents see they're growing, they're trying, they're developing, they're becoming gradually, each day they're getting closer and closer to being adults, and they're becoming more and more mature. So in the same way, we may be initiated as Brahmins, and we may be trying to be Vaishnavas, but we know that it's not perfect. Especially we read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and you read the example. I forget which person it is, but who's the devotee who, there was a little bit of dust on the thing. Who was it? Prabhupada, you remember? Ramananda Puri, was it? And a little dust fell down, and he said all the fruit offering had to be taken away, and the whole place had to be cleaned, and then get a whole new offering. And for us, it's like, oh, scratch my head. All right, just quickly wash my hands, carry on. It's just, we're not naturally of the really, really high standard of cleanliness and austerity that we read about in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And we're not of the high standards of learning. We read about the Vaishnavas who Chaitanya Mahaprabhu associated with. We read about the Goswamis. We read about all these amazing personalities. And it's like, we read about Junior Haridas, who, gave up his body because he looked at a woman. And it's like, we're like, uh-oh, keep the head down here. I hope Lord Chaitanya doesn't know what's going on in my mind half the time, But we're like children. And that's, Prabhupada and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu, they know what's going on in the heart. We may be struggling so much externally because of the conditioning that we've created for ourselves or the conditioning that we've been raised up in. Even if we become or start to practice bhakti at a relatively young age, most of us maybe we're in our 20s, early to mid 20s, maybe our late teens, but that already means that we've got, years and years and years and years of really heavy conditioning. Really, really, really heavy conditioning is there. And in some cases, some of that conditioning and some of those samskaras which come with that conditioning, they can last a lifetime. We may never be perfect Vaishnavas, but we do the best we can. We do the best we can to follow our authorities, to follow Srila Prabhupada, to follow our spiritual master, and to follow in the footsteps of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda, not by imitation, but by engaging in their service, by following their directions, by following in their instructions. We do, a Brahmin studies the Vedas. We study Srila Prabhupada's books as much as we can. We be as simple as we're able to be without, but we shouldn't artificially try to be artificially renounced to the point where it's actually, sometimes we're so caught up with the externals of so-called Brahminical life that it distracts us from the internals of actually practicing bhakti, actually remembering Krishna, thinking of Krishna, acting for Krishna's pleasure. And this is the main thing. Are we trying to remember Krishna? Are we trying to serve Krishna? Are we trying to be conscious of Krishna? Are we trying to chant nicely? Are we trying to give some time each day to hearing about and reading about and learning more about Krishna? Are we trying to bring our mind back? Yeah, the mind may wander. We may not be perfect. The mind can wander to all sorts of terrible things. But when we realize the mind is wandering, then we bring the mind back. And this is what Lord Chaitanya sees. This is what Lord Chaitanya sees. He sees us bringing the mind back to Krishna. He sees us making the endeavor to bring the mind back to remembering Krishna. And therefore, he accepts us. He accepts our offerings. He accepts our bhakti. And he helps us. Every step we take towards Krishna, as we surrender to Krishna, Krishna rewards us accordingly. But everything that Krishna does is unlimited. Every single last thing, every word of the Bhagavad Gita is completely unlimited. Everything that Krishna does has unlimited meaning. So when, our surrender may be limited, but the reciprocation that Krishna makes is unlimited because everything Krishna does is unlimited. So if we just keep trying, then the help that Krishna gives will be unlimited. And then we'll get there eventually, hopefully, by Krishna willing, by the grace of Srila Prabhupada, the Parampara, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu. It's recently I was joining a group, like a Facebook group to do with Vedic, something. But anyway, one of the questions was, who is your favorite deity, or what is your, and it's like, well, really, for all of us, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu should really be the main focus, because by worshipping Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then we can approach everyone. Only by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's grace can we approach Radha and Krishna. Only by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's grace can we approach Nrsingadev. We can't do anything without the grace of Lord Chaitanya. So, but, and there's this wonderful address that Srila Prabhupada gives in Atlanta. he's traveling to Atlanta, and in the beginning of the address, he says, so we've come from this place and this place and this place. We went here and we went there, and now we've arrived here. And he says, but I see this temple is the best. Prabhupada actually said that everywhere he went. He said, I see this temple is the best. And everyone's like, Jai, Jai Prabhupada. And then in that temple were the deities of Gaura Nitai, and he started speaking about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and you can hear it's an incredibly moving thing to listen to if you get a chance. Prabhupada, it's very, very clear from the audio that Prabhupada's really struggling to speak because he's so emotional. You know, he's crying and he's thinking about the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And normally when Prabhupada would give an address, it would sometimes go on for 15, 20, 25, 30 minutes. But this is a very short thing. It's the whole thing from beginning to end is about 2.5 minutes, because Prabhupada becomes so overwhelmed with emotion, thinking about how kind Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is. And then he finishes off by saying, so please just take shelter of Sri Chaitanya and Nityananda and go back to Godhead. Thank you very much. You know, so this is the point is, you know, we may be so unqualified externally, but our qualification is that we take shelter of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And by the grace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, I forget the Sanskrit, but, you know, by the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, even easy thing. When one doesn't remember Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then even easy things become very, very difficult. But if one remembers Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then even difficult things become very, very easy. So if we just take shelter of Lord Chaitanya, read Chaitanya Charitamrita, remember Lord Chaitanya, chant Lord Chaitanya's names, Gauranga, and then anyone can do it, even me. Anyone can, you know, hopefully by their grace. So we'll stop there. If there are any questions, comments, corrections, reflections, anything at all from anyone, or if anyone online has anything that they'd like to share, anything at all from anyone? Proper.
Just go back to what you were saying earlier on about a Vaishnava offers this love and devotion, at least he's attempting to. And in terms of the caste system, then before Jagannath was manifest as Jagannath, he accepted service from the king of the Savaras, the pig herders, and because of that, then even today still they have a special place in Lord Jagannath's service in Rath Yatra. So the Lord although he created the caste system, he's not saying these ones are superior and these ones have got no access to me. Everybody's got access. And, Mahatma Gandhi, he tried to create a non-caste system of Harijans, or just everyone was children of God. Actually, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed that the true Harijan is actually the Nahambipurna, Chararatana, Vibhajana, Siddhartha, etc. So we're not this, that, or the next thing, because each birth we take, it may be a different caste, it may be a different species, but the soul is eternally related to Krishna. And although mankind sometimes tries to monopolize even the system that God sets up, then Krishna, he's open to everybody still. So it was nice you made that point.
Thank you. Yeah, it's something that came up over the last couple of weeks that we've been teaching Gita Life, particularly about the Kshatriyas, because when we think of the Guru Parampara, we think of the saintly teachers in the line of disciplic succession. But what does Krishna say in the Bhagavad Gita? Evam Parampara Pratam Imam Raja Sevadu. The reason he establishes the Guru Parampara is to teach the saintly kings. That's actually because, and then whatever action a great man performs, common people follow. So, you know, that's the idea, is that knowledge is taught to the kings and rulers, and then they share that knowledge with everyone. And that's the purpose for society. That, you know, the Brahmins have the knowledge through Guru Parampara, they teach to the kings, the rulers, the governors, and the governors share that knowledge and actually facilitate every single person within their kingdom, make sure that every person within the kingdom has an equal opportunity to take part in that process of serving Krishna. So
it's interesting because one of the qualities of being a Brahmin is humility, isn't it?
Yeah,
And yet we see that those who are more caste conscious, they're quite the opposite, they're more proud.
yeah,
So they cannot disqualify themselves by their own behaviour,
yeah,
because it's by guna and karma, isn't it?
yeah. And that's why Chaitanya Charitamrita says that this verse, Trinadapi Sunichi Natagarapi Sunishmuna, that describes the qualities of humility, and it says that, you know, everyone should wear this verse on the thread of the holy name and wear it around their neck at all times. So that's like it's our kind of guiding light in terms of our behaviour. Still keep forgetting that one. Do you have a prayer? You were going to say something?
I just wanted to thank you very much for the class. It actually answered the question that I wanted to ask today anyway, which was that, because I was, I've been listening to a lot of Indra Raj's classes on the six Goswamis and talking about Lord Chaitanya's preaching mission. And, you know, there's an often quoted pastime of Lord Chaitanya traveling just like here in the Jharikandi forest and also traveling in South India when everyone became converted from worshipping Lord Shiva to worshipping Lord Vishnu. Everyone became Vaishnavas. And I was actually thinking, well, how did simple people who actually perhaps were engaged in like rituals which would normally be considered to be in the mode of ignorance, how would they all of a sudden become involved in, you know, like deity worship that's very much in the mode of goodness? And I was wondering whether, because although we've been talking about the fact that it's the externals are less important than the internal bhakti, but still in those societies at that time when deity worship and big temples and very ancient traditions were so strong, and are still today, especially in South India. And I was just thinking whether it was when they said everyone became converted to Vaishnavas. I was just wondering how that actually happened, and how also can it happen for those people who aren't clean and who live in, just like we're talking about the Sabras, we're also talking about the Muchis who like the cobblers. You know, so how we can create like a place for those people in our society. I was just wondering how that happened then and how we can think about it now. So just wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, it's a sort of another common misconception, and this isn't to sort of promote, but it's just to sort of clarify that, you know, like for instance, when we become initiated and we take our vows and we vow the do's and the do nots. So the do's are that we will chant 16 rounds every day. Also nowadays, more and more kind of gurus are asking the disciples to at least take a sort of unofficial vow that they'll read Prabhupada's books every day, these kind of things. And then the do nots, you know, no illicit sex, no intoxication, no meat eating, no gambling. And sometimes there's this sort of misconception there that the do nots constitute spiritual activity. But you know, Prabhupada says, you know, monkeys are vegetarian, but it doesn't mean they're spiritual, you know. So, you know, someone can be, you know, celibate, someone can be doing all these other things, but those in and of themselves are not spiritual activities. That doesn't help, that doesn't make one advance in spiritual life, avoiding these things. Whereas the things that do cause us to advance in spiritual consciousness are chanting Krishna's names and engaging in service. You know, I mean, in terms of deity worship, there was a really nice video which Jagannath Priya shared with me the other day. And it was in Soho Street. All the members of the community were talking about how they're serving Radha Nandanishwara, and she was also thinking we could do something similar here. And the thing is, you know, and her idea, you know, she's listening, sorry to embarrass, but, you know, she was thinking, it's like, how is Shranga still here? You know, how is Shranga Thakur doing deity worship? By growing vegetables for the deities. How is Ian doing deity worship? By preparing food that's going to be distributed on behalf of the deities. How's Prabhupada Prana doing deity worship? By somehow managing to keep the heads together of all the people in the community and somehow hold everything together. How's Raghunath doing deity worship? By sort of promoting Krishna Eco Farm on behalf of Kodanitai Mayapur Shashi. So deity worship is not just something which is limited to being on the altar offering arati, and practicing spiritual life is not something which is just limited to those who are strictly following the sort of externals. So like for instance, Srinivasacharya, I forget the name of the town, something Vishnupur. Was it Karna Vishnupur? Vishnupur, he and the same principle was there. Imam Raja Sevadu, he converted the king of Vishnupur into a Vaishnava, and then he guided the king to make that whole place a Vaishnava state. And even to the point where chanting a certain number of rounds became like a daily duty of the citizens, things like this. Now, it may be that there were people in that place who were, they may have been, a very low caste. They may not have been vegetarian. They may not have been celibate. They may not have been doing these things, but they were Vaishnavas because they were, they were chanting Krishna's names and they were worshipping the deity somehow through their occupational duty. So a lot of the time what Srila Prabhupada's doing in his books is he's kind of establishing a kind of Brahminical culture which can then guide and support the whole world. So it's not necessarily that every single person on the planet is going to become an initiated Brahmana. And many people may not practice very strictly externally, but the goal of the Sankirtan movement is to encourage as many people as possible to chant Krishna's names and to hear about Krishna. And then in that way, like Rupa Goswami says, anyone who chants Krishna's name even once is considered a Vaishnava. So this is the sort of goal. And then from that, you will have a percentage. And when you're talking about internationally, that's a hell of a lot of people. You will have this portion who are following more strictly in a slightly more Brahminical way, who can act as guides to the rest of society. Even Prabhupada's very, very liberal. Prabhupada says at least don't eat cows. He says that at least don't eat cows. If you have to eat meat, if you really have to, at least don't eat cows. That's Brahminical. So does that sort of make sense? In the sense that, we have a certain idea of what being a Vaishnava is, but Lord Chaitanya may have a slightly broader idea of what a Vaishnava is.
Yes, pretty much. It reminded me of the Grandic campaign when we felt that everyone who was engaged in helping the mission through some contribution, we felt that they were connected to the deities in that way.
Yeah, I remember, just to finish off, I remember I was in Leeds very, very early one day. I think we started around 9 in the morning or something. And I remember one of the first people I met, I turned around, I was there with my clipboard, I turned around and the guy that was walking towards me was the guitarist from my favorite band from before I joined. So I was a bit starstruck. I was still a bachelor at the time. So, he was really nice, really friendly. He went to the bank, he gave a donation. He took Journey of Self-Discovery. I always remember that. I gave him that book and I asked him to say Garanga. And that kind of stopped him in his tracks. He was like, "That's you lot? What is that?" And I just said, "Oh, it means to be happy." And he said, "It's all over the place." He says, "I'm seeing that on the bridges everywhere." But it kind of got me thinking, a lot of these, I was thinking the Queen of England's probably chanted Garanga, every politician, and these are not people that are walking around the street. They're not people who we're going to stop and give books to or get donations from. But that campaign meant that every single person probably in Britain at one point in time heard Lord Chaitanya's holy name, and then that's the beginning. That's the beginning of their journey. Who knows what's going to happen? Keshava Bharati Maharaj actually said, I spoke with him around about 9 years ago. I was talking with him on the phone, and he said that don't be surprised in Scotland if things really explode at a certain point in time. And it was, I was listening, am I going over? Can I just finish on this last little thing? I was listening to a discussion a few days ago. It was, anyone's heard of the band Shelter? So Raghunath Raghunath Kapo, he was having a discussion, and part of the discussion they said that in the 90s there was this kind of explosion of Krishna consciousness. Many people became devotees in the 90s. Through that kind of hardcore punk scene, and for like myself, we came from this sort of pseudo hippie revival scene that was going on at the same time, and many people kind of came from that. And you can call it speculation, it is a speculation, but one theory that some devotees have is that in the 70s, so many books got distributed at that time, and the 80s, that those books were kind of sitting in people's houses, having this effect, and people were growing up in those houses, just having this subtle effect of being in the house with the Srimad Bhagavatam, with Prabhupada's books. And then once that seed came to fruition, then many people became devotees. So Keshava Bharati said, don't be surprised if in Scotland at a certain point in history, whether it's now or 10 years from now, whatever, but all those books that have gone out, the time bombs, they'll have an effect, you know, and then we need to be sort of prepared for that effect when it happens. Okay, I'm sorry I've gone over, Prabhu. I'll stop there. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Koda Nitai Mai Pushashi ki jai, Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai, Jai Gaura Ramananda ki jai.
Ramananda Prabhu ki
Gaura Ramananda ki jai.